Hello, and welcome. Welcome to a laptop shopping guide for 2022, Architecture Student Edition. So, as we begin this video, I will assume that you know nothing about laptops and what goes inside of them. And if you do, you should skip ahead. There is going to be timestamps on the video timeline to where I talk about specific brands and specific deals on the internet for the laptops. But before we kind of start, before we talk about that, I will explain what goes inside of the laptop and what you should look out for. So the first thing that I want to note is PC versus Mac, or Windows versus Mac OS, I guess, should be a little bit more accurate. Basically, don't buy a Mac. And not because MacBooks are bad or anything. No, they're really fine machines. It just simply some programs don't work properly on a Mac. So if you have already bought a Mac, or if you see a very, very good deal to buy a MacBook Pro, for instance, then just keep in mind that over time, in year 2 or year 3 of your studies, once you get into 3D modeling with Revit and whatnot, you will need to get Windows on your MacBook laptop, which is not that hard to do, but you will need to purchase the Windows license, which is an extra expense that you might not want to spend. So that's why I'm not going to be talking about Macs, and all of my kind of explanation is going to be about Windows-based machines. Oh, and one more thing. In the video description, as well as the comments, the pinned comment, I will be giving you a link to an Excel spreadsheet where I've dug out all of the best deals on Amazon. So check that out. Over time, this list will become dated, right? And I guess if you're watching this in 2022, it should still be, like most of the products should still be available there. And I'll talk about it a little bit more a little bit later. So let's start with key components to look at when you are searching for a laptop. So the first thing is the CPU, the processor, which is basically the brain of your machine, the part that makes all of the calculations happen. There are two manufacturers of the CPU. There's either AMD or Intel. It absolutely doesn't matter which one you choose. Both make really good CPUs. And the naming of these CPUs is pretty simple, right? So we have Intel Core i3, i5, i7, i9. And then AMD's Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9. 3, 5, 7, 9. Bigger number, stronger CPU in general terms. As an architect, you can get away with using any kind of a CPU on your machine, but I would suggest not going for the lowest end models, meaning Ryzen 3 as well as Intel i3. Both of those you should not buy a laptop with those kind of CPUs. Everything else should work. I will talk more about this later in the video, but that's at least the basic gist of it. Then we have RAM. RAM is like a temporary memory that is very fast. So think of it this way. When you open up a program, the program is stored in your hard disk, right? Somewhere in the storage. We'll talk about storage in a second, but it's stored. And that program needs to be fetched by the CPU to make calculations and, to do stuff. So storage in general is very slow. So it needs to have some sort of a fast bridge to read the information as you request something. So let's say you click a button, right, and the computer needs to do something, it needs to do it fast. So that's where RAM comes in. It loads parts of your either program or 3D model or whatever, textures, into this temporary memory that is very fast. So how much of it do you need? Well, as an architect, you need quite a lot comparing to other jobs, I guess. You need at least 16 gigabytes. Anything below that, 16 gigabytes. Anything below that is, I would consider unusable, right? So as you're searching for a laptop, choose 16 gigabytes as your bottom line. Anything above that is great. We'll, again, talk more about that in a second. Then we have graphics cards. So GPUs. We had CPUs, now we have GPUs. There are two types of graphics cards. There's the integrated graphics as well as dedicated graphics. Integrated, dedicated. Integrated basically means that your processor, the CPU, takes care of the graphics. That is a no-go for us architects because that means that the processor will work overtime and it's very weak in terms of dealing with graphics in general. So it's good for browsing the internet and whatnot, but definitely not for 3D modeling and so on. So we skip over the integrated ones, the integrated graphics. We only care about the dedicated ones. And for the dedicated, there is a trick that I will teach you on how to always choose laptops that definitely have dedicated graphics cards. And that is by searching for NVIDIA. I'll put up like a name somewhere here. NVIDIA GPUs. So NVIDIA only makes dedicated graphics cards, and they have like a monopoly on the graphics. In general, like AMD and Intel are trying to, doesn't matter, but NVIDIA. So you search for NVIDIA graphics cards, and then you will know for a fact that you have a dedicated graphics card, meaning a separate chip on your laptop that its only purpose is to deal with the graphics. All right, storage. So storage is like the long-term memory, right? That's where all of your photos, videos, whatever programs, textures, 3D models are located, like a really large USB stick. There are two types of storage, HDD and SSD. HDD is hard disk drive, SSD is solid state drive. Doesn't matter. You want an SSD storage with at least 512 gigabytes of capacity. I'm not gonna go deeper into this. SSD is much, much faster than HDD, hard disk drive. So that's the one that you want. I don't even know if they make laptops with hard disk drives anymore. I think all of them are SSDs these days. Anyway, half a terabyte, 512 megabytes. If you get a laptop with 1 terabyte or more of storage, that's even better. Right, and continuing on to the screen. And this is going to be the last one. We'll move on from here. So for the screen, okay, so you can't have a small screen. If you have a small screen as an architect, your drawing experience or 3D modeling experience is going to be horrible. So I would suggest the smallest screen that you should search for is 14 inches and higher than that. So 14, 15, 16, 17. For me personally, I would say 16 inches. A 16-inch screen is a sweet spot, but mileage may vary. Screen type and color accuracy don't matter because I will suggest that you should get a separate external monitor a large one, like 27, 24, 32 inches, like a pretty large monitor, to which you will hook up your laptop, and you will do most of the modeling and so on, watching your viewport through that particular monitor. And that monitor should be color accurate and should be good. And thankfully, there are really great deals from Asus Pro Art lineup for these kind of monitors. And I'll add a few of them in the Excel spreadsheet about which I was talking about slightly before, like a few minutes ago. Video description, pinned comment, whatever. So you'll see some of them there. And that is honestly it. Everything else is just additional bells and whistles to the laptop. So where do we go from here? How do we talk about what you actually need to look for? Well, let's look at this through the software, through the lens of what kind of programs you will use as an architect and what kind of hardware do those programs need. So I will separate it out into 3 tiers of programs according to how heavy of a hardware do they require for you to have. So tier 1 is going to be all of the programs that you learn in the first year of architecture school and that are focused on 2D drawing and image editing. So we're talking Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, AutoCAD, Corel Draw, whatever. These kind of 2-dimensional drawing and editing programs. These require the least amount of resources out of all of the software that you're going to be using. So for CPU, any CPU that you find that is not an Intel i3 or Ryzen 3, so it's not the bottom line, right, of the CPUs. Anything else should do the trick. So don't worry about the CPUs at all. For the RAM, 16 gigabytes. Already told you this. 16 gigabytes should be enough to run any of these softwares. And for GPU, basically anything that starts with NVIDIA. So meaning NVIDIA MX series, NVIDIA GTX series, NVIDIA RTX series, all of these will work. By the way, MX, GTX, RTX, that is in a climbing order, right? So MX is the weakest one, then you have the GTX series, and then you have the RTX series, which is the heavy hitter GPUs. Anyway, so for these programs, basically anything works. Then you have tier 2, which is like 3D modeling software. So you have like Rhino, you have same AutoCAD, honestly, you can 3D model with AutoCAD. You have Blender, you have Revit, ArchiCAD, SketchUp, I guess. For these programs, like the hardware needs to be slightly better, but not that much better. So for CPU, honestly, same as for the tier that we had before. Anything except i3 and Ryzen 3. For the RAM, I would say 16 gigabytes should be enough. Should. How do I phrase this? Well, while you're at school, your 3D models are not that detailed because you only have 1 semester to work on them and you're learning the tools and so the models are not detailed to the nuts and bolts of the building, right? So you should not have a model that would require more than 16 gigabytes of RAM. Is it possible to use up 16 gigs while at school? Absolutely, yes. But that usually only happens in your master's, like master's thesis projects and whatnot. So I would say for just 3D modeling, 16 gigabytes should be enough. And for GPU, the graphics card, For 3D modeling, you need a pretty strong graphics card, honestly. So anything that starts with NVIDIA RTX. So before we used NVIDIA MX, GTX, or RTX. Now for just 3D modeling, you need an RTX card, I would say. Technically, you can get away with GTX, but they don't make those anymore. So I'm just saying RTX, NVIDIA RTX. So I already mentioned this, but these graphics cards, the RTX ones, are the highest performance GPUs that you can buy on the market. And we operate within that, not framework, but within that space of the graphics cards, within the RTX one. By the way, you will probably notice that there's NVIDIA Quadro, like the fourth one, the Quadro cards. No, very expensive. So for the same amount of performance, you would pay like 5 times more than as for the RTX card. Those are tailored for the businesses and like the large scale, not employees, how do you call them? Customers, like full-on architecture office and so on would buy Quadro GPUs. You as a single user should not. Those are too expensive. All right, which, by the way, comes down to tier 3. Tier 3 of the software, the most demanding software that we will encounter, and that is visualization software. There are 2 types, or 2 flavors, I guess, of this kind of software. There's the physically accurate render engines, such as V-Ray, Cycles, Redshift, Corona, and so on. And there's real-time render engines, such as Twinmotion, Unreal Engine 5 now, D5, what else is there? Enscape is there. So without going too deep into this, real-time rendering is basically what you see in a video game. So every second there's 60 renders that are pushed to you and then showed on the screen. And physically accurate rendering is something that you see in a Pixar movie, for instance. So every frame is simulated, like the light in the frame is actually simulated and is physically accurate and so on. So every frame takes a while to render out. So in my opinion, in the not so distant future, like a few years, 5 years or so, every engine will be real-time render engine. So that's what I'm going to kind of be focusing on, because you are buying a laptop for the future, right? So that is future-proof. So these real-time render engines, they require insane resources, like insane graphics cards and whatnot. So let's jump into it. CPU processor, i5 and Ryzen 5, also i3 and Ryzen 3, of course, don't work anymore. No. You need i7 or Ryzen 7 or i9 Ryzen 9, one of these 4 models. So CPUs need to be bumped up one step. For RAM, this is where you do need 32 gigabytes of RAM, in my opinion, or else you're not going to have a fun time. So 32 gigs or more would help. And for GPU, this is where it hits the hardest. It's not enough at this point just to have the NVIDIA RTX card. You actually need to have a high-end NVIDIA RTX card. So what's a high-end NVIDIA RTX? Well, let me explain it through naming conventions. Let's say, for example, NVIDIA RTX 3070. So in this name, 3070 is the key number, right? 3 at the start, like the 3000. So 3 at the start means that it's 3rd generation. There's also 2nd generations, which starts with, 2000, and there's this 3rd generation. And 70 is the class. So we have 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Well, you have 90s, but that is just ridiculous. So you have 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You have 4 classes for each generation. Each class is like cars, right? It's one step beyond the previous one. So for real-time rendering, you can't have lowest class RTX cards, meaning you can't have 2050, 2060. 2050 doesn't exist, I know, but you can't have 2050, 2060. Technically, you can have 2070, that's fine. And you can't have 3050 cards. Everything else will work. So let me list them for you so that we are on the same page. From the lowest spec to the highest spec, the graphics cards that you should look for: RTX 2070, RTX 3060, RTX 2080, RTX 3070, RTX 3080. What's missing? RTX 3050 and RTX 2060. Those two are not, well, they are still powerful cards and you would be able to use them. It's just I'm now telling you all of the hardware that will be future proof. So even if you have a 3050 graphics card, for instance, my laptop runs a graphics card that is like half of the RTX 3050. So it's like in terms of performance, it's half of that, and I'm just fine. So, but I know that in a few years, this laptop will start lacking, and I will not be able to run every scene on it. So just for comparison. Also, please keep in mind that you will be able to render out at your school, right? With the school's computers. So that's a thought. You might end up buying a laptop for drawing and 3D modeling, and then when it comes down to rendering, you might just use a school's computer to render out your visualizations. Or you can, doesn't matter. So there are ways of how to get computing power without buying a very expensive laptop. Okay, so now with this out of the way, I actually want to, wait, just give me a second. I will be showing you the Excel spreadsheet that I was working on, and I will kind of guide you through what we have here. So on the left-hand side, you have every major company that makes the laptops, and I fished out the laptop classes that are skewed towards designers, right, for each company. So you have Dell XPS 15, Dell XPS 17, Alienware, you have Lenovo's ThinkPads, you have Asus ProArt, and ZenBook, MSI, and so on, right? So every company has its own like laptop series that are tailored for the designers. So if you see these kind of laptops, you will know that those probably have a little bit better of a screen and other bells and whistles that are, better for designers. I personally don't really care about that stuff that much, and I say that if you're on a budget, just buy a gaming PC. Those things are powerful. They look like complete garbage, but they're at least powerful and cheap. One thing to note is I have crossed out Creator Z16 because it's bad. Don't buy it. It overheats. It's way too thin. They try to make it very lightweight and way too thin and also powerful. That immediately equals out to heat, a lot of heat. So this one's bad. Everything else about it is great. Like the screen is amazing and the design looks awesome and so on, but it's just too hot. And then Acer's Concept D lineup hasn't been updated this year, so I'm crossing them out until they update their laptops, because you don't want to pay extra money for a laptop that is old, basically. And that's that about the left hand side. Then we have the right hand side, Amazon laptop shopping tier list. We have 3 tiers. Tier 1, good enough, does the job. Tier 2, best price to performance ratio. Tier 3, I would substitute my own laptop for these bad boys. And also you have monitors. As I promised, I've fished out 4 color accurate good monitors for you to choose from. I really like Asus ProArt lineup. I want to say that. So here, ProArt 16, here in the would substitute my own laptop for these, you can see that first 4 laptops here are Asus. That is, I think that they are very, very good. And also first 3 screens or monitors are made by Asus and are part of ProArt lineup. This is actually the monitor that I have, and I have only good things to say about it. The color accuracy is great. It works really, really well. And also it's very cheap compared to any other professional grade monitor. Coming back to the list that we have here, tier 1, good enough does the job. What does that even mean? Well, it means that as you buy this laptop, it should be enough. This laptop should be enough to get you through 5 years of your education. So that was my thought process, and these were the best laptops that I could find, best price, to performance for the laptops that I could find on Amazon. So you can see the price here and the shipping cost here and the final price here. Then best price to performance is what I call workhorses. Laptops that are just, once they get old, you can just still use them as a render piece, so you just kind of leave it in the back of the room, and it just kind of renders out your pictures during the nighttime. So these are just more beastie versions of the good enough does the job laptops. And you can see that they come with a little bit of an extra price because they are just more powerful. And then you have tier 3, would substitute my own laptop for these. These are, how do you explain this? So you can always buy a laptop for $22,000. There is a Asus ProArt, by the way, laptop for $22,000. You can buy it, but why? Why would you? It's way too expensive. It doesn't make sense. So here I try to find the best laptops that you could buy that are still reasonably priced, right? On Amazon, at least. So the pricing goes between $3,000 and $4,000 or $5,000, which $5,000 is very, very expensive. But for it, you get a very, very fancy laptop. I wouldn't suggest buying this. I feel like $5,000 is just too much for any kind of a computer. You can get one that's much, much cheaper than this. But the ProArt Studio books, as well as, for instance, Zephyrus Duo, all of these laptops are, best of the best in my opinion. And I think with that, we will end it here. I hope you've learned something. I hope this is going to be... one more thing. One more thing before we finish. If you want a laptop that is cheaper than the cheapest one I could find for 1,000. Let's say if you want a laptop that is cheaper than $1,000, what is it, 10,000 crowns, something like that. You should most definitely search for a used laptop. I think that it makes so much more sense at that point just to buy a laptop that has been used for a year or so, and that is powerful. So what if it has like a scratch or whatnot? Because you will be saving so much money in doing so. So anything below 1,000, buy a laptop locally for sure, and buy it used. There's plenty of good deals out there for the used ones as well. Okay, we're done. We're done here. Hope this was helpful. I'll see you. Bye.